The following program is made possible by Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
He has served the public for more than 30 years, including a quarter century as the county manager of San Mateo County.
John Maltbie reflects on the life and times of our county. The game is government. The game is on.
Hi, I'm Kevin Mullen.
And I'm Mark Simon. Welcome to the game.
John Maltbie retires as San Mateo County Manager in November after 25 years on the job, a quarter century that saw unprecedented, unexpected, and dramatic change in the county and the job of county government itself. He is credited with an innovative approach to government he termed the Agile Work Force, along with a wide range of innovative social programs he implemented. As the county has grown, so has county government, extending its reach into every social issue, including homelessness, charter schools, health care, and reading.
When John Maltbie started as the San Mateo County Manager in 1989, the county budget was $473 million, and there were 4,500 employees working at the county government. The final 2018-19 budget he submitted for the board approval was $2.7 billion, and the county had 5,500 employees. That's an 480% increase in the size of the budget and a 21% increase in the number of people working for county government. Although I'm reminded of the line from Calvin Coolidge, how many people work at the White House? He said about half of them. John Maltbie, welcome. Thank you for being here. Tell us, let's talk a little bit about that growth and how the county has changed. It's a remarkable amount of change in a county that wasn't known for changing much over many of the years that you were running the government there.
Well, I think, one way to look at the change maybe is to take a look at the cost of housing. 30 years ago, you could buy a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house in San Carlos, where our studio is today, for about $350,000. Now sells for about $2 million. That's about a 450% increase. So the cost of housing, I think, has dramatically and pervasively changed much of what is happening in this county today.
Yeah. And you think, obviously, you're trying to put the growth of the government in that context. How much of that is driven by the change? I assume you're saying that's what's driving the changes that are taking place in county government.
Well, I think the response to that, I mean, obviously, you talk to the average citizens and certainly the things that Kevin deals with in Sacramento on a regular basis, and people talk about the cost of housing and the consequences of the rising cost of housing and transportation. Those are the two major issues, and they're inexplicably intertwined. You can never separate those two. And those are the problems that the average citizen is dealing with today, whether it's getting to work, shopping, picking up the kids from daycare, or just trying to afford a decent place to live. Those are real problems that real people deal with, and the county deals in many respects with the consequences of those problems.
So, retrospectively, looking back at your quarter century, what were the kinds of things that kept you up at night when you first started your job in this county? And then sort of, so we get a sense of kind of the breadth of how this county has changed over the years. But what was the biggest challenge facing you walking in as the county manager?
Well, I think the biggest challenge probably was trying to shift the emphasis in a very conservative county fiscally from really just looking at all of the issues that the county dealt with from a fiscal perspective to try to be a little more forward thinking, to take a look at the real costs of social programs and how those could be impacted by prevention and spending money up front in some areas. And so I think in the early days, those were some of the things we dealt with. And then, of course, 1990, 91, there was a recession, and we went right back to trying to figure out where the next dollar was coming from.
The counties are the place where social services are delivered. Not at the state, not at the city level. The counties are the ones who are directly involved in helping people. Have people's problems changed? Has the scope of them changed? Has the nature of them changed?
Oh, I think the problems probably still are very much the same. We're the safety net. So for those that have nothing and are in need of health care, they seek care at the county hospital, in the county clinics. For those that are homeless, there's a variety of social services, from shelters to transition programs and other things to help the homeless get reestablished. For those that need job training, there are a variety of job training programs for the individuals that break the law. We have a criminal justice system that hasn't changed all that much. So I think what the county does probably hasn't changed so much, but the emphasis on different aspects of how we do that has changed.
Yeah. Where has the growth, we talked about the growth in the number of employees, which is actually fairly modest if you look at it over 25 years. Where has most of that growth come?
Most of the growth has come in the area of healthcare and criminal justice.
Mm-hmm. And why is that?
Well, in the case of criminal justice, over a long period of time, going back to the 1970s, we have increasingly passed laws that are tougher and tougher. People are, more likely to get into trouble because of new laws, and when they get in trouble, they're likely to stay in the criminal justice system longer, which means more court appearances, longer probation, longer stays in county jail. In terms of health care, until the ACA was passed, approximately 30 to 40,000 people in this county had no health care, and that was growing as the cost of health care continues to grow. And now we're starting to see that trend reemerge as ACA is being squeezed down and down. So, there's more doctors, more nurses, more ancillary personnel in the healthcare system. And so it's a function of changing laws and expectations in terms of criminal justice and just increasing costs in terms of the healthcare.
I'm going to take a quick break. Stick around. We'll be right back with County Manager John Maltbie.
It's been over 150 years since Wells Fargo first opened for business. Since then, we've enjoyed your community support, and we're passionate about returning it. Every day, Wells Fargo team members roll up their sleeves and donate their time to organizations and charitable groups throughout the Bay Area. Nationally, we've committed even more. In just the past 2 years alone, we've donated over $70 million to support schools and educational programs. It's a commitment we're proud of. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
Welcome back to the game. I'm Mark Simon. He's Kevin Mullen. Over here we have San Mateo County Manager John Maltbie. You had a question.
So, John, I wanted to ask you about this perception of San Mateo County as a wealthy county. And it is certainly to some degree, but we have pockets of poverty, high cost of living, middle class getting squeezed. So we need resources from the state government, from the federal government. I always find it's a little difficult to make that case because there is that perception, hey, you guys have Facebook and YouTube and you're doing fine. But I try to explain to folks the high cost of living and how difficult it is certainly to find housing. And we talked about the transportation issues. So do you fight that battle as well when you are dealing with intergovernmental relationships, other levels of government, trying to make the case for the full picture of San Mateo County?
Well, we do. I mean, housing programs are a good example that we were just talking about. The federal government has a median cost of living standard on a national basis that it applies to California and specifically to San Mateo County. Well, guess what? We don't have $250,000 houses in San Mateo County. And so when you apply that standard, it just doesn't work. And we're always fighting that battle because of the cost of living here. I'm reminded of an old story. I was city manager in Arizona for a few years, and Carl Hayden was a longtime senator from Arizona. And there was a bill that was up in the Senate for flood control measures, and so he was advocating it in specific money for Arizona. And his other senator said, well, Senator, for 50 years now, you've been advocating reclamation money because how dry it is in Arizona. and Hayden stood up and he says, well, he says it's like this. It doesn't rain much in Arizona, but it rains all at one time in 1 hour.
Let's look ahead a little bit. You've referenced the housing cost a couple of times. A lot is being proposed to be built in different parts of the county. People are trying to get their arms around the whole housing problem. Home for All, a countywide initiative that Kevin's been involved with, I've been involved with, you've been involved with. Is this a problem with a solution, or is it a problem that we're just going to chip away at the edges?
Well, unfortunately, I think it's a problem we're going to chip away at the edges. I don't think there's either the political will in this county to build enough housing that you start to bend the curve enough to make a difference. And there's certainly, there's enough land in this county that if it were built with housing, it could make a difference. But people value just as much their open space, and that's not going to change. And so at the end of the day, I think you recognize the realities. You do what you can where you can. But so long as we have as many jobs in this area as we do, most of the people to fill those jobs are going to come from the east. And I think the way that you deal with that issue is you start to put substantial amounts of money into transportation to get people rapidly from, frankly, as far away as Stockton and Manteca to and from work in the Bay Area. And if we could do that, if we could cut their commute in half, I think we've done the right thing. And those places have housing that's relatively affordable for most of the people that work here. I think that's probably where the emphasis should be put.
So, John, I want to ask you about pensions, a big challenge for local governments, for the state government, entitlements at the federal level, and how we do retirement security. My perception is that the county has done a solid job of prepaying many of these pensions when times have been good and budgets have been flush. Is that accurate? And what is your prognosis as you look out across the local government landscape, and how well local governments are prepared to deal with those unfunded liabilities and make sure that they're meeting their obligations to workers and the promises that have been made?
For the most part, it's a real challenge for local government to keep up with post-retirement benefits. Our county has done two things that have helped to mitigate some of the costs that the citizens would otherwise bear. One is that our post-retirement benefits are based on accumulated sick leave. So they're not an unlimited benefit. If you have essentially saved 20 years worth of sick leave, you have 20 years worth of health care benefits, no more, no less. Unfortunately, most employees don't save that much. So that's mitigated the health care costs. In terms of pensions, as you said, we're a wealthy county, and we've been fortunate that we've been able to really reduce our unfunded liability to a very manageable amount compared to PERS, for instance. Yeah, I think those are real challenges for the cities and for other counties that are in a different situation. And I think it goes back to a root problem, and that is that all of us, the county included, gave significant increases in retirement benefits that were post-dated, if you will. In other words, rather than saying this benefit starts today and it's going to be paid for by employees and by the employer, they said, and this benefit is retroactive to whenever you started your career. Well, guess what? Nobody put in money for those benefits. So it's no wonder there's a big liability, and that's what we're paying for now. And I think that's the challenge we've got to figure out, how to get around that.
Of course, we can't overlook the fact that in the case of, say, the state PERS system, they also miscalculated how much they were going to generate in the length of time they were going to have successful returns on their
They were pretty optimistic projections, yeah.
It raises an interesting question about how government is changing. It used to be that you went to work for government, you got paid a little bit less, but you got substantially better benefits, mostly in the form of retirement and health care. Those benefits are being pared back. They're still not equal to what takes place in the private sector, where an employee pays 100% of their retirement.
Right.
But at the same time, public employee salaries seem to have creeped up, especially at the higher level. Is county government becoming more and more looking like private industry, or is it still a positive place for somebody to plan a long-term career?
Well, I still think it's a positive place for a long-term career. And we certainly see that. Every month we have employee recognition ceremonies for people who've been here 10, 20, 30, and we had a 40-year employee just a few days ago. And invariably, when the employee comes up and gets their award, and their 20-year award, and they said, you know, when I started 20 years ago, I thought I was only going to be here a year or two,
Yeah.
and here I am. And so I think people come to work for the county, and if they're not imbued with a sense of public service, I think once they start in the job for a while, that becomes a real motivating factor. Mm-hmm. And people look at that then as a career and stay longer periods of time. And then when you take a look at people, for instance, in law enforcement, those are typically career people that stay with their employer for a long period of time. They don't move around a lot.
You're talking about how housing costs are probably not going to change much. What that means, it sounds like it leaves a lot of people out in the cold. A lot of people who simply can't afford to live here either commute great distances or just choose not to live here, or they live multiple families in some cases.
Right.
So is that problem going to stay in place as well?
Yeah, and it's a huge problem for public and private employers. And one of the challenges I think we have is that we're just not going to get people from outside the Bay Area to come and take jobs. They can't afford it. They can't afford to live here with what we pay, even though we pay really good salaries in comparison to what somebody in Nevada or Arizona makes. So that means that we really have to limit our search for potential employees to relatively the 9 or 12 counties that we consider part of the Bay Area, and really even in our case probably San Francisco, San Mateo, Santa Clara, Santa Cruz, Alameda County. Mm-hmm. And so that means the employees that we have, we really have to grow our own. We really have to prepare people for leadership positions to keep them engaged and ready to move up in the organization.
Okay, we're going to come back to that very thought in a few minutes, but stick around. We'll be right back. We're going to take a short break.
It's been over 150 years since Wells Fargo first opened for business. Since then, we've enjoyed your community support, and we're passionate about returning it. Every day, Wells Fargo team members roll up their sleeves and donate their time to organizations and charitable groups throughout the Bay Area. Nationally, we've committed even more. In just the past 2 years alone, we've donated over $70 million to support schools and educational programs. It's a commitment we're proud of. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
Welcome back to the game. I'm Mark Simon. He's Kevin Mullen. And over here we have John Maltbie, who's retiring in November after 25 years as the San Mateo County Manager. You talked about housing. The other problem everybody talks about is traffic. And you touched a little bit on if we improve the commute to great distances, that can help people come to and from. But the question is the traffic we have on this peninsula basically what it's going to be? Is that a permanent condition now?
Well, I think that, by moving a small percentage of the commuters into public transit, in buses and a bus system that works for everybody, Caltrain, electrifying Caltrain, getting it more trains on the track, and of course BART. If we can do that, I think we mitigate to some degree the traffic conditions. But, unless we change radically this balance between jobs and housing, we got lots of people that are trying to get around, and, it's like a funnel. We're this is the hour, the neck of the hourglass. And what we can do is make it somewhat better. But on the other hand, there's an awful lot of people in a lot of parts of the country would love to have the problem that we have because it's a problem of prosperity. It's a problem of jobs, and we have jobs. We have lots of jobs. Now we have to figure out how best to manage this situation.
So, John, you'll be making a transition to Mike Callaghy, who's been named as the new county manager to succeed you. What will be your biggest piece of advice to the incoming county manager, particularly when it comes to dealing with the board dynamics? You're working with these 5 elected officials. Over the years, lots of different personalities and egos and turf and all those kinds of things that come along with issues, public policy issues. What's your biggest piece of advice to Mr. Callaghy?
Well, you don't need to be John Maltbie, you need to be Mike Callaghy. Mike is a great person, a great selection for county manager. He'll do an outstanding job. He needs to establish his own relationship with the board. He needs to do it in a way that's consistent with his values and views and philosophy and beliefs. And he needs to keep the candy dish in the office full.
Well, has working with the board changed? I mean, we've had district elections now. You and I have talked privately on a couple of occasions about whether or not that means that the focus, the countywide focus of each supervisor is somewhat diminished because they're focusing on their district, which from a practical political point of view, they should. Has that changed? And is that likely to change more so as you leave?
Well, it is changing. David Canepa is the first supervisor that has been elected under the district system as a first-term supervisor. Right. The other supervisors served in the old system, and I think all the supervisors tend to focus on their district certainly more than they had in the past, and that may not be a bad thing necessarily. But the challenge, I think, is always to go beyond the balance of what's best for my district and weigh that against what's best for the county. And I think one of the jobs of the county manager, frankly, is going to be how do you keep putting that perspective in front of them when the tendency probably will be to look a little more narrowly at what the issue is.
I mean, you see that in Santa Clara County with say, the Stanford issue of their proposal to build, to expand. And you can see in some ways other members of the board deferring to the member who represents that district.
Right.
Let me ask you about the future of the county. The state of the county sounds like it's pretty good. The budget's in good shape. You've had some tax measures that have passed that probably help. You've got a board that's interested and innovative in aggressively tackling social issues. Where do you see the future of the county? What are the things you're optimistic about? What are the things you're pessimistic about?
Well, I think from the optimistic standpoint, I think the board looking forward is going to have a county that sees a decline in criminal justice demands in the system. I think that there will be a board that will see to fruition the benefits of many of the prevention programs that it put in place, particularly dealing with children, and the benefits of that. It will be a board that will see the benefits early in the next decade of paying off its unfunded liability and have probably $100 million more in disposable income for the county as a result of that. So those are the certainly in the immediate future, some of the positive aspects. Negative aspects, I think, are the demographics, that we're an older county and aging. There's going to be a huge unmet and expensive demand for all sorts of services for senior citizens to keep them in their home, and when they need to go into nursing facilities. In this county, there's probably a shortage of 10,000 beds now. And we're right on the leading edge of that demographic in the state, but it's a tsunami that's going to sweep the country. And then the gentrification that's taking place. I mentioned the plus side. We're seeing less crime, and Juvenile Hall was built 15 years ago, had 180 beds. We're lucky to have 60 kids in there now. I mean, it's the demographics are changing. So the gentrification is because we're so expensive, the poorest folks are moving out. Now I think that's a real challenge in the long run. It's a challenge from a social justice and equity standpoint, and it's just a challenge for all of us in our daily lives. As you know, I eat at town frequently for lunch, and I talk to the chef, Jeremy, there. And he said, we'd love to open another restaurant in nearby, but we just can't get the workers. And we pay top dollar for our salaries. And, and I think magnify that challenge 1,000 times or 10,000 times in this county in different venues, and that's going to be a real problem.
So one of your legacies will be the next generation of Maltbies in local government management. I imagine that's a source of pride for you. So reflect on that briefly, and then what else would you like to be remembered for? People don't like that legacy word, but what do you want people to say about you when they reflect on your tenure?
Well, obviously I'm very proud of my family, and I think they are continuing and will continue to make great contributions in the public service. I became a public servant because I believe in the it's an honorable profession, and that we all have an obligation to help other people and to do the best we can, and I'm proud that they're continuing in that vein. I think what I would like to be most remembered for is I was somebody that really spoke up for children that were underprivileged, adults that were underprivileged when there was something that was an issue and they didn't have a seat at the table. When I was there, I was speaking for them.
And we're going to have to stop you there. It's not a bad place to stop. John Maltbie, thank you for being with us. Congratulations on your retirement. Good luck.
Thank you.
And thank you for being with us. I'm Mark Simon.
And I'm Kevin Mullen.
Join us next time on The Game.